Welcome to the Frontline Advantage. We have a very special guest today, Don McPherson, who I had the opportunity to meet in 2019 as part of Generator's cohort when I was at Clickit. Don and I have stayed in touch, and I'm super excited to speak with him today because he has a ton of experience in the employee engagement space. He's worked at American Express, founded a company called Modern Survey that eventually sold to Aon, where he was head of global talent marketing. And today he runs 12 Geniuses and can tell you all about the exciting guests he has on that show. Don, I'd love for you to first introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about, your background, what excited you about speaking with me that time during Generator, and even what's allowed us to keep up to date today and our relationship now.
Well, as you mentioned, I have been in the employee engagement space for about 25 years, and my personal mission in life is to help people reach their full performance potential, and that's at work and outside of work. And having an engaged workplace is one of those ways in which people can reach their full performance potential. And so that's what I've been doing with my career, and now it's evolved a little bit into helping leaders understand what the trends that are shaping the way we live and work are. I started my career, as you mentioned, at American Express, and then in 1999 started a company called Modern Survey, and we ran that until 2016. And then we started to see the market change a little bit, and we figured we either need big investment or we need to exit, and that's what we decided to do. And I think we made the decision around the end of 2014, and we executed for about 13 months doing a number of things that we needed to have an attractive acquisition. And so we sold in February of 2016 to Aon. I worked there for 2 years, running their talent marketing space, 5 different business units globally. And that was a lot of fun, but I decided I needed to do the entrepreneurial route again. And that's when I started 12 Geniuses.
Fantastic. So you spent a lot of time in the survey space, employee survey specialist at American Express, company called Modern Survey. Tell us all exactly what you were doing with surveys.
When I started the business, we did paper surveys, and it's really hard to imagine that now because everything is online. And so we were helping companies transition from a paper survey to an online survey. And there was a lot of risk management that needed to be done and a lot of apprehension that these companies had. But we eventually started to be leaders in this space, conducting the surveys online and then doing reports online and having interactive reporting and all of these innovations that the space now enjoys. And so that was what we were doing as a company. And what I was doing was really advocating for why companies want to pay attention to employee engagement. I think it's pretty evident today that if you have engaged employees, you're going to more effectively reach your company goals, whether they be financial or customer satisfaction goals, things of that nature, retention goals. But back then, you still needed to help educate people around why this is important and why they might want to do this. And so I was helping them educate leaders around this. And now it's more around how do we make engagement happen? How do we train our leaders to recognize employees, develop them, fill them with a sense of purpose and meaning in their work and other things that can make engagement viable within an organization.
What was it like in 2005? Were you creating a new category of taking paper surveys and putting them online, or were there competitive? Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were doing. So, we founded the company in 1999, but we really didn't start to take off until around 2002 or so. And some of our first surveys were paper surveys, but yes, we were starting a new category. And even companies like Gallup, really traditional companies like that, they didn't necessarily have a technology to do online surveys. And Glint and Tiny Pulse and Qualtrics, these companies didn't exist. SurveyMonkey was around that time, and Qualtrics was starting up, but I think they were a little bit after us. And so, yes, this was a completely new category, and it's exciting to create a new category, but it's also very daunting because there's an incredible amount of education that needs to occur. And what we needed to do was help people understand, decision makers, that, we don't work well with people who can't see the future or don't want to create the future. We work well with mavericks and people who are kind of on the cutting edge and leading edge. And so it was really important for us to kind of really quickly identify if this is the right person for us, if this is the right company for us. Otherwise, we might spin our wheels for a long, long time.
That is so fascinating. And I think that's something that resonates a lot with us at Teamforce, where, there are companies that deal, say, for a very, very high turnover, and they could greatly benefit from our solution. But we generally find that they're not the most, that they're not almost ready for the solution, because the amount of effort that would be required to change their culture, given all the feedback coming in, would be overwhelming and daunting. And so we find that the organizations that aspire to be best in class actually are the ones that are most excited. They're forward thinking, they're progressive, they see the value of this, and they see that it's going to become a norm, and they want to stay on the cutting edge. Walk us through that journey of when you're first tackling a market and you're thinking about qualifying those customers. What were the tactics you utilized to educate? And then how did you think about the distribution? Is it different than how companies do that today as the internet's evolved and is more mature?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now companies get it and understand it, but the category has been around for a long time, to your point, but you're in a different position because you're where we were 20 years ago, right? Is around the education of it and things of that matter. And you mentioned something that I think is really critical, and that's the qualification. As the vendor, as the supplier, you need to qualify. Whereas, we wanted to just be in the game and have them make the selection. But as we got a little bit more mature, we started to look at them and profile them and qualify them. Are they going to be a good client for us, not only now, but long term? Can we expand their thinking? And can we help improve the organization? Like that's got to be central to the qualification process. And I'll give you an example of that. A lot of times we would meet with a CEO or an executive team, and maybe some executive would say, well, we don't want to measure this. I mean, what if the results are bad? I'm thinking to myself, you have to ask yourself this question, like, okay, you're the wrong people for us then if that's your mentality. And I remember a CEO telling me one time, oh, I don't want to measure employee engagement. I know what the results are going to be. I'm like, okay, well, if you know what the results are going to be, maybe we can come in and help you improve the results, because he knew that they were going to be bad. And so I think that selection process from the vendor side, from your side or from our side back then, is so key, because otherwise you just spread yourself so thin trying to market to everybody, trying to sell to everybody. And if you're marketing and selling to the wrong people, that's consuming a lot of your energy and resources. And so I think we got really, really good at understanding who our target was and how to message to them effectively so we could accelerate our sales process.
What are some techniques and tips that you talked about or you thought about that really helped accelerate your growth in creating this category, and that maybe, time tested from years ago that maybe founders today could benefit from doing?
I'll give you one, and I stole this from another founder years and years ago, but he said we have a Pac-Man strategy to marketing. And he drew a circle, and the big part of the circle is yellow Pac-Man. So that takes up about 80% of the circle. And then there's the mouth, which is 20% of the entire circle, and that's the blue. And he said, we want the blue. He said, everybody else goes after the yellow. These are the big players. These are the companies that are pursuing the biggest companies out there. He said, we're going to do something different, and we can find enough clients out of that 20%, the companies that our competitors are not paying attention to, that we're going to create a great company. And they did, and that's exactly what we did. Was we allowed the Gallups and the big players, our big competitors, to go after the biggest fish, and we decided we're not going to do that. We're going to go after mid-sized companies where we can talk to the CEO, where we can help make them, long-term clients of ours. And so we kind of turned our marketing on its head, and then we got to be very, very edgy with our marketing. And it wasn't for everybody. It was for that 20%. And so we had cartoon characters that were part of our marketing. Even my sales presentations and the marketing webinars that we did, it was very different. It was really honing in on those 20%, and we called them Mavericks. And they loved being Mavericks. And that really changed things for us because we got a reputation for being very successful, closing deals. The sales cycles were shorter, 6 to 9 months instead of 18 months. Average sales size were very attractive. And so that shift, really made a huge difference for us in terms of being able to grow 30 to 40% a year.
When we think about this notion, you talked about surveying and engagement. It seems so obvious today. Was there an education or requirement to help people understand the value in surveying, and then not only surveying, but surveying regularly rather than once a year, taking actual steps to implement action plans and then measure and follow through consistently by asking about those changes? Was that all sort of an evolution that you had to educate the world? And how did you do that?
Yeah, there was still a lot of education. And to be honest with you, when we started, a lot of our clients initially thought that doing the survey was the project. That was the job. And while that's a lot of work, you get no benefit from it. And I would say, this is like stepping on a scale, right? I step on the scale, I'm 185 pounds, and that's information. But what's my goal? Is my goal 178 pounds? Is that 193 pounds? And what am I going to do in order to get to my goal? And so, when you step on the scale like that, you're no more healthy than before you stepped on the scale. You just know more information. And so that was probably another piece that we had to work on to get people educated around. No, the measurement, it's helpful, but the work, 80% of the work, is really what you do afterwards to improve engagement at an organizational level, improve it at the team level, improve it at different branches within the organization. And so we had to educate on all of these pieces here. And then when you think about doing pulse surveys, quarterly or monthly surveys, that's just nonstop. You're constantly having this be top of mind. But also, it's important to point out, in the 1980s, when you looked at company valuations, and this was part of my pitch, you looked at company valuations, 80% of a company's valuation was based on tangible assets. So the companies that were big back then would be the auto companies and banks and things like that, where they had tangible assets. Now you look at the valuations of companies, and it's 80% or 90% intangible assets. It's not land and cash and equipment. It's you and me and everybody who leaves at the end of the day. And so engaging people and making sure that they're committed to the organization and fully capable, that determines winners from losers. And so, this is not something that's nice to have. It's absolutely essential for organizations if they're going to be competitive now and into the future.
Absolutely. I mean, that is complete music to our ears. And, when you think of Team Force, we've taken this idea of the annual survey where you talked about even sometimes it's quarterly or monthly. And we've said, why don't you engage every day? And it's not just a survey with us. It could be a work-related question, but it could also be, questions about the first language you learned to speak, or, how long is your commute, or, what we could do to help empathize with you for having to stand on your feet all day. Could we get you some kind of solution like padded shoe insoles or foot pads or massage chair in the break room? Really changing the relationship from, employee and employer to someone who's part of a team, where we're trying to say to the decision makers, the buyers, that, listen, this isn't like a nice to have, like you talk about. This is to actually help you with business results. Like engaging and getting the buy-in and commitment from everyone in your organization is going to help you as an organization achieve higher revenue and profitability than if you completely ignore what they have to say or think and just simply tell them what to do. I mean, these are your ears and your eyes. And for our case, people on the front line who are seeing these things happen. It's really interesting to see the evolution of surveying and how it's becoming more and more mainstream and critical, especially in a world, as you talk about, with assets being these intangibles, and AI may even in some ways also further exacerbate us on that curve where it's more and more intangibles. When you worked with a lot of these organizations, that were just getting online or now utilizing at that time online surveys, was there ever kind of a focus on getting survey from the entire workforce? Was that normal? Did you have customers you dealt with that had frontline or deskless workers? Did they get surveyed? Did companies care about their voice?
It was almost always everyone. And again, we had to come up with innovative ways to measure these deskless workers that you're talking about. And so, generally, I'm thinking way back before everybody had a smartphone. Once everybody got a smartphone, then it became a lot easier to access these deskless workers. But prior to that, it was challenging, but people wanted to hear from them. But I think, what you are talking about is really, really important and critical, because we're finding in a lot of cases, it's difficult to find deskless workers, depending on the industry. And so you're making sure that they're engaged and committed to the organization and wanting to stay with the organization and giving best efforts, that has become way more important. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is when you do a good job of gathering data on these employees and hearing from them, you're empowering them. And for a lot of deskless workers, who have been doing this work for a long time, decades or years and years, they've been forgotten and neglected. And now when an organization empowers them and actually cares about what they have to say and does something about it, you're unleashing some very, very powerful people and powerful employees for your organization. And so I think you're well positioned into the future, because it will continue to be very difficult to attract and retain people in these positions. And when you empower them, when you treat them well, when you care about what they have to say and you act on the data, you're going to differentiate yourself and you're going to succeed as an organization.
For a long time, people have sort of said, go to college, get a 4-year degree. You're not as impressive if you decide to go into manufacturing, or you decide to do something that's maybe seen as, non-college degree oriented. And so now we have this shortage of talent where when you even think about the foreseeable future for the next couple of years at least, there's a real need for these types of folks. They want to be treated with dignity. They want to be treated with respect. They want to be valued, by their manager, by the organization. And of course, they want competitive pay. But I think these companies that realize that it's a lot more than just, hey, I can pay you 50 cents more. And they realize that, the same kinds of things we did in the knowledge workforce, where we asked for that feedback and we started to implement solutions that improve the working culture, are the companies that are going to thrive when it comes to this deskless workforce environment. So we're very excited to hear that. Are there any other thoughts or suggestions, words of wisdom you want to share with the audience? Whether it's different buyers or decision makers or administrators, other founders, given all your expertise in employee engagement and surveying?
Sure. Not necessarily in those spaces, but one thing that I have realized over the quarter century that I've been doing this work in, and I call it the rule of 85. My experience is that about 5% of the workforce is going to be fully engaged no matter what. And I call those people Dianes. I worked with a woman named Diane, and she just, every day she came to work positive, and she was sure that she's going to get the next sale, and, left with an upbeat attitude. Those people are really, really rare to find. 1 in 20 really kind of fit that profile. So those are real gems to get. And then there's the other side of things, and that's 10% of the workforce. And no matter what you do, you're never going to please those people. They're just going to be disengaged. They're going to grumble. And if you can select them out of your organization, you're going to benefit. The rest of us, and I include myself in this because I'm neither a Diane or I'm not on that other side, that 10%, but the rest of us have the ability to be fully engaged. And when you as a leader can pay them fairly, create an environment of trust, create an environment of belonging, have values that are known and understood, that's kind of the baseline stuff that you need to do as an organization, then engagement is possible. Now your role as a leader is to give them confidence in the organization, develop them, recognize them, give them purpose in their work. That's what you can do to drive engagement. And then the final thing is, every day people choose. They make a choice. Am I going to give my best at work, or am I going to give something less? The more you can understand this as a leader, whether you're a CEO or a manager of others, the better off you're going to be. So select for those Dianes, they covet them. Make sure those other people, those 10%ers who are never going to give you their best, make sure they're selected out. If you do hire them, make sure you get them out of the organization as quickly as possible, because you're never going to engage them. That's just their personality type. And then do the right things to engage these 85%. You're going to succeed.
That's fantastic. And I actually want to also give a quick plug to 12 Geniuses and the work you're doing, Don, on all of that. So you have the successful exit to Aon. You spend a couple of years working in corporate, doing great work there, and then you decide to start 12 Geniuses. Tell the audience a little bit about what 12 Geniuses is about, leadership, your learnings, and what they should go discover by listening in.
What we're doing with 12 Geniuses is a podcast, and then I do some speaking and consulting for organizations to really help leaders understand what are the changes that are coming that are going to change the way we live and going to change the way we work. And when we better understand what these changes are, then we can prepare our people for these changes, not 3 months in advance of these changes, but 3 years out. So what do I need to do? What does my team need to learn in order to be relevant in the future? And so that's where I'm really committed to helping people understand is, what's the impact of AI? What are the biotechnologies that are going to extend life, and how do we need to rethink work? What are the social trends that are going to massively change the way we think about the world, whether it be immigration or inequality or addiction? So we're studying all of these different topics and sharing our guests with our audience so leaders can harness these changes and help their people be relevant and successful into the future. And so that's what I wanted to give back to the people who have helped me and helped my career, is to analyze these trends so we can all flourish and we're not left behind.
That is so awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Don. And we'll see you next time on the Frontline Advantage.